Okay, so I've got control over the slide deck.
Yes, you do.
Okay, so and everybody can hear me?
Yes, we can hear you quite loud and clear. Yeah.
Beautiful. Okay, so welcome to the webinar on how to lead yourself and influence others. And thank you very much for your patience as we overcome the technology. So my name is Andrew Bryant, and I have been studying human performance for as long as I can remember. My entire career has been the curiosity around how do we do something better. Back in the 80s when I first studied psychology, psychology was about how to fix broken people. But as I began to work with elite athletes, the question was not how to fix broken people, but how do people do something better. So as you're listening to this webinar, the questions on your mind should be, what am I doing that I want to do better? What do I want to improve? What am I already doing better that I can improve? Is there a block or is there a challenge? And the reality in a modern world is that everything around us is both volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. This term VUCA, volatility, or uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, was coined by the US military after the first terror attacks on the World Trade Center. But it has been a term that is now used in business, that whatever we are doing, if we're an entrepreneur or we're in business, everything is uncertain and complex. And self-leadership, this topic that I am going to share with you, is perhaps an antidote to this complexity. What we know about stress is that it is inversely proportional to level of control, i.e. the more control you feel or perceive you have, the less stress you experience. If the world of your business or your life is constantly changing and you feel you have very little control over it, then you're going to have a significant amount of stress. And one of the things that self-leadership does is enable us to manage our stress by increasing our level of control. So let me start with a self-leadership story. And this is a story of a South American woman. This is not actually her picture. We'll call her Victoria, not her real name, because this young lady was a coachee of mine. In 2010, she left South America for Singapore, where I now live, for a job offer. And I asked her how she felt at that time. And she said, well, I was terrified. And I said, well, why? And she said, well, because I felt that, everybody on the team that I would be joining would know more than I did. I'm sure we've all felt that anxiety that we don't know as much as we're expected to know. So I said to her, well, why did you come? And she said, well, they asked me to come, therefore I felt, well, I must have something to offer. So she left her children behind and she came to Singapore, and she worked hard for a couple of years, and it was about in 2012 that I met her. And at this point, she discovered that she was good at what she did. It took her 2 years to work it out. And I said, well, what are you good at? And she said, well, as an IT project lead, I discovered that, I have the ability to make the complex simple and to get buy-in from people from multiple cultures. And I said, well, how many people at your level can do that? She said, well, very few. So I said, well, what's your challenge then? She said, well, now I've discovered I'm good at what I do. I have difficulty speaking up at meetings and for people to understand that I have this competency. So she lacked what we would perhaps call executive presence or confidence. So I did some coaching with her around the self-leadership methodology that I'm about to share with you. And with a very short time, her ability then to speak up and project her competence with confidence got her a promotion. After that promotion, the project eventually ended, and her visa for Singapore was ended, and she had to return to South America. But she liked it in Singapore, and so instead of just taking her fate and not having a visa through job, she set up her own business and created an import-export situation where she could get a business visa and returned here to Singapore. when she was back here in Singapore, her competence was so obvious that she received multiple job offers, and she called me again for coaching, this time to work out which would be the best job for her career. Now, this is a remarkable young lady. Firstly, she had the self-leadership to take a challenge, and secondly, to work on herself and overcome adversity, and is now becoming extremely successful. And what she did, and I show you in this quote, is that her human potential was clarified because she set an intention, and she used that intention to influence others and therefore create an impact. And these three I's, intention, influence, and impact, are the core of self-leadership. So the question I have for you on this webinar today is to ask yourself, in your life, in your career, are you the driver or are you the passenger? Now, sometimes it's nice to be the passenger. As a professional speaker, I travel a great deal, and it's lovely when I arrive at an airport and there's somebody there with my name on it that takes me to a car and drives me to my destination. So there are times in our life when we need a professional, we need somebody who has expertise, and we give them control. But most of the time, if you love to drive a car, you know that feeling of being in control, setting direction, navigating the highway, and being the driver. And as a coach, I really want to help people to find out, well, where should I be the driver that I've been giving up control to other people? And often just asking this question wakes up the mind to, well, hang on a moment, I could take control of that. I could influence that situation, and I could go where I wanted to go. But of course, if you're going to be the driver, you have to set a destination. In 2012, I published this book with my co-author, Dr. Anna Kazan, on self-leadership. And we examined the various techniques and strategies that people could use to get themselves towards their goals and objectives. At its simplest, self-leadership is the ability to influence yourself to achieve your objectives. On screen, you'll see a slightly larger, expanded definition, which I'm sure you've read by now, but I'll just read it again for you. Self-leadership is having a developed sense of who you are, what you can do, where you're going, coupled with the ability to influence your communication and emotions and behaviors on the way to getting there. So we need to know who we are, self-awareness. We need to know what we can do, what our skills are. We obviously need a direction. And then it's this ability to influence communication. If you're good at something but you can't communicate to others that you're good at it, you will not be as effective or as successful. And of course, our emotions, how we react to the world around us, and the actions that we take, our behaviors, are going to drive our results. To put this in a schematic, this is how it would look. In fact, this model is not in the book. I developed it after the book was published to help people to understand. And you'll see immediately the three I's: intention, influence, and impact. So intention is highlighted here by a sense of a laser beam. If we know exactly what we want, that laser beam will drive us. The light bulb icon is the self-awareness. Self-confidence is demonstrated with this man with his arms in the air, because when we're confident, it's like winning a race, winning a world championship. You'll see any sports person throw their arms in the air with self-confidence. Self-efficacy is something you may not have heard of, and I've got here a bulldozer. Self-efficacy is the belief in yourself to overcome objectives, to bulldoze through the stuff that's in the way. And with these three S's, self-awareness, self-confidence, and self-efficacy, the influence will occur, the magnet of influence, and impact, how we measure things in the world. So we'll come back at the end to this infographic to make sure I've explained it all to you. So self-awareness, looking at yourself. In working with leaders, there's a clear correlation between the level of self-awareness and the effectiveness as a leader or as an influencer. We have to be able to look in the mirror and be aware of the lenses that we're looking at ourselves and we're looking at the world. Right? Just like a camera, we need to, it's what we focus on that matters. And it's what we zoom in on that matters, or we zoom out on. And in my speeches, I use the metaphor of a chessboard, and I would invite an audience to choose, and this is in the first chapter of the book, a piece on the chessboard that most represents their personality. If we think about it, of course, the pawn is fairly powerless, the knight is risk-embracing, the bishop cuts quickly across the board, is perhaps the person that likes to take shortcuts, whereas the rook or the castle is the person that's very solid and stable. The queen is a multitasker. The king may be self-important but requires all of the pieces on the board. And after asking an audience to choose which piece of a chessboard that feels most like them, I tell them what they should have chosen. And that is to stop being a piece of wood being pushed around by somebody else. One of the first pieces of self-awareness is that who we are, a lot of that has been given to us by our early experiences in childhood, from our parents, from our teachers, from our circumstances. And the real key of chess is to be able to step back and see the whole board, to be able to strategize and use different pieces. Who you are right now today does not necessarily determine your entire future. You have choice on how you play aspects of your personality. Now, if you're introvert or extrovert, you take that into consideration. You manage your energy. If you're a more detailed person, you might want to use that to benefit. If you're a big picture person, you might use that to your benefit. But just because you filter in a particular way doesn't mean you don't have the flexibility. And this is a constant personal growth for us. The challenge with limited self-awareness is we see the world through a limited lens and believe that to be the truth. It's like that old maxim of the three men introduced to different parts of an elephant, the trunk, the body, and the tail, each thinking that they have the whole truth. Intention drives self-awareness, and self-awareness drives intention, but intention is the big why of whatever it is that you're doing. Congratulations for being on this webinar. I don't know why you tuned in, but you have a personal why. What's important to you that is driving you to be better? And it's the clarity of that intention that is directly correlated with how effective you will be, how clear you are about what you want. And of course, giving a webinar on the 4th of January, it's time for New Year's resolutions. People might want to exercise and lose weight. I just got back from a holiday and stepped on the scales myself and set a new intention. My intention on holiday was, I just got back from Brazil, was to enjoy new experiences, try new foods, and of course that intention has a consequence. But as I will set a new intention to return to my normal state of health and fitness, that intention will drive my behaviors. But if I continue with two intentions, one to get fit and to return to my weight, and one to enjoy every piece of food that comes my way, then two intentions cannot coexist. With intentionality, we'll come into the need for making decisions, to say yes to what we want and say no to what we don't want. And in my self-leadership workshops, I take people through a process of the ability to say no. Most motivational speakers will tell you to say yes to your goals and dreams. The reality is that to say yes to something, you have to make a decision, right? And that decision is to say no to other things. If you want a university degree, you have to say yes to studying and no to some of the partying and distractions that will happen. I remember that choice from a long time back. So what is your intention for 2016? What are the 2 or 3 things you'll singularly focus on that are not contradictory to each other that will get you the results? Here's some questions that you could ask around intention. What do you want to be? What do you want to do? And what do you want to have? And it's important to notice the order of these 3 questions, because the marketing world will tell us what do we want to have, whether it's a fast car or a yacht or an apartment or a house. But really, before we have something, we have to take action. And our actions are driven by who we want to be. And self-leadership starts at that process. As Gandhi was purported to say, be the change you want to see in the world. You can change yourself, and that will change your outside areas. So what do you want to be this year? Whether it's healthier or more successful, or be a better person in relationship. Then that will drive your actions, and then you will get the results. The singular factor in success that makes the most difference is self-confidence. I hope you'll agree. If you're a manager in any way and you have a piece of work to delegate, you're much more likely to delegate that to the person with higher self-confidence than the one with lower self-confidence. If you think about yourself, you say, well, Andrew, it's easy to be confident if I know how to do it. Right? But we have to project this confidence that we can handle whatever's coming our way, which leads us from self-confidence into what I'm going to explain in a moment, which is self-efficacy. Most people have self-confidence initially, but have allowed it to be discounted by somebody else. And the question is, are you discounting yourself? Living in Singapore, people love a discount. I don't know where you're listening to me from, but I'm sure people love a discount. And if I asked you to measure your self-esteem, how you value yourself on a scale of 1 to 10 and give yourself a number, I wonder what number you would give yourself. Would you give yourself a 10, or would you give yourself a 9 or an 8 or a 7? Typically, and I've done this around the world, people will give themselves somewhere around 7 or 8 out of 10 for their self-esteem. And self-esteem means self-value. And if you only gave yourself 8 out of 10, you gave yourself a 20% discount, because you should value yourself 100%. Because if you don't value yourself, why would anybody else value you? We unconsciously measure people on their confidence. Now, there is a danger in overconfidence, particularly if you can't deliver, and that can lead to arrogance and to hubris. But you should be 100% confident in what you do and do well. And if I could ask you, what do you do really well? Could you say, I do this? And say it with 100% confidence and no arrogance. I mean, you could start with something as simple. Can you boil an egg? Can you make a bowl of rice or a bowl of instant noodles? Could you do that? And I think most of us would say yes, with a 100% surety. Now, if somebody asks you, are you good at your job? And you go, well, kind of, then you've already doubted yourself and reduced your value on the marketplace. So an exercise I would recommend you do is to fill a page with things that you are really confident to do. As simple as, I can speak. I can take action. I'm 100% confident I can do these things. The mind instructs the body, and the body instructs the mind. The posture that the icon of confidence is the person with their arms in the air. If you actually held your arms in the air in the victory pose, it would actually change your brain chemistry. Alternatively, you change the way your brain focuses on something, and it changes your physiology. If you remember a time when you felt confident, your breathing will change. Your posture changes. You look out through the eyes of confidence, and that inner voice or inner dialogue changes also. So make a list of the things that in your life where you were 100% confident, usually just after you've achieved something. Maybe it was you've just passed an exam, or you just gave a good interview, and then that you had that flush of confidence. If you can capture that as an image in your mind and then replay that, notice how your breathing, your posture changes. Notice how you look out at the world through those eyes. You'll notice you have control of your confidence. It's not the other way around. Typically, when coaching people around presenting or speaking, the people say, well, I want to be more confident in front of an audience. But they're waiting for the audience to give them the cue that they can be confident, instead of the other way around, being confident first, which gives the audience the cue on how to respond. So if we have self-awareness and self-confidence, we can move into this concept called self-efficacy, the ability to overcome obstacles, to achieve our objectives by overcoming obstacles. So I've already asked you, are you the driver of your career? Are you able to overcome obstacles to get your goals met? Think about a concrete example of where you've dealt with a setback or resistance and overcome. You know, if I mention the name Bill Gates and his company Microsoft, of course you immediately had a mind of an incredibly wealthy and successful man. But when Bill Gates offered the DOS operating system to IBM, he hadn't written the code yet. He hadn't built it. But he had a mindset, we can do this. And he sold something that he had not yet created with self-efficacy. I haven't done it yet, but I'm sure I can do it. And this factor will make you successful if you believe in yourself that you can learn what you need to learn, do what you need to do to overcome resistance. What, in my experience, stops people doing this is a fear of failure. Is they say, well, if I say I can do it but I haven't done it before, what if I fail? Well, what if you do fail? You may fail many times. In software, that now is a whole method of building software. Agile software development is about failing fast. But in our life, we're terrified of failure because of what that will do potentially to our image. But I want you to understand that there is no failure, only feedback for improvement. Self-leaders try new things, take the feedback, build on it, and get better. This strong, positive relationship to taking action, taking the feedback, making the adjustment without taking it personally is the key effort in doing this. When we have this intention, we have the self-awareness, the self-confidence, and the self-efficacy, we really begin to positively influence. Of course, we've been influencing all the way through this process, but now we are positively influencing, like an electromagnet drawing things to us. And this is the secret sauce to success, is not only your ability to do what you do, but your ability to influence others. The Center for Talent Innovation suggests that 26% of what it takes to get promoted is the ability to influence those above us, to be visible as being confident and being effective, to get something done. And this is a term that is now coined as executive presence, an area that I'm often asked to coach individuals or teams, particularly on a global stage, how to be influential and to have this confident presence. So here's a definition for you on executive presence: the ability to project gravitas, confidence, and poise under pressure. Gravitas means weightiness or being substantive or substantial. So this is knowing what you know. You have an area of expertise, of study, of experience. You have confidence on that, and you have the poise to deliver that under pressure. In addition, obviously how you look, appearance, your speaking skills, assertiveness, and most importantly, the ability to read an audience or situation contributes to your executive presence. So if you want a promotion or you're running your own company, you want to be more successful, work on your confidence and your ability to project this gravitas, not just under normal circumstances, but as I said earlier, in this VUCA world, in uncertainty, we can say, yeah, okay, it's uncertain, but we can work our way through this. We will find a solution. And if we overlay the model here on influence, is that your stress reduces as you increase your control. You can work on your self-awareness. You can fine-tune your intentionality. You can build your confidence. You can believe in your ability to overcome obstacles, to be resilient. That increases your locus of control, your personal control. And therefore, you're expanding your sphere of influence. Maybe you can't get it done, but your confidence and your intentionality influences somebody else to help you get it done. And your matrix of who you can connect to and communicate to increases. I encourage you to draw a stakeholder map. And if you look at this diagram, I've placed you with a series of circles. And if we look below you, you would suggest, well, that's the person that reports to you. The person that's lateral to that reports to somebody else. Either side of you would be two circles of peers. Above you is your boss. Lateral to that is your boss's boss. And above above your boss is your boss's boss. The most important circle there, of course, to influence is you. If you don't influence yourself, you can't influence any of those. But each of these circles has their own intentionality, their own why are they doing what they do. Because we don't just need to lead ourselves, we need to influence others to influence themselves to achieve objectives. And the secret here, therefore, is to ask, don't tell. Telling your boss is usually career suicide. Telling your subordinates just creates drones who reluctantly follow your instructions. But if I've started asking you why you want to achieve what you want to achieve, then your motivation kicks in. It becomes intrinsic to you. So as a coach, I ask questions. In coaching people to lead and manage their own lives, I coach them to ask their own questions and ask questions of others. We cannot not respond to a question. When we're asked a question, whether we open our mouths or not, our mind processes that question. When I ask you, how would you like to be more successful? Your brain immediately starts to think of those things. So if we have influence, we begin to get impact. And we need to focus on those results. What do you want to have happen? What results are you looking for? If we were doing a negotiation class and you turned up to a negotiation going, I'll see what happens, you would lose your shirt in the negotiation. You have to have a clear objective. So the intention is to create some level of impact, to focus on results. And if you're working on those results with and through others, there's a clear formula. If you set the expectations for the results, that you or the people that you are leading have the competency and you have the right attitude or mindset, you will get the results. So if I'm diagnosing some efficiency or effectiveness, I'm going to ask myself these three questions. Well, what were the expectations set? Did people know what was supposed to happen? Did they have the skills and competencies? Did they need to be trained? Most importantly, though, but did they have the mindset and the attitude? Did they know why it was important to them? Have they been asked that? And that will get the results. So when we're looking at results, this is a clear formula for working that out. So let's just go back to our model. We set intentions to create influence, to create impact. Our personal effectiveness is about constant self-awareness. Leaders are always working on themselves. They're receiving coaching or they're journaling themselves. They're noticing the results that they get. They are building on a daily basis their self-confidence. Their self-efficacy, sorry, I can't say it myself today. Their self-efficacy is through taking feedback, but with the self-belief that if they don't get it right the first time, they can adjust and do it again, which creates influence and therefore impact. I won't fully go through this by reading it, but in the slide deck, which you can download from this webinar site, it gives you a more expanded definition of the self-awareness, the self-confidence, and the self-efficacy. You influence yourself to influence others, and I just realized that my feedback is that there is a typo even in this. I love this picture. It was taken as I'm returning home through Changi Airport, and there's my two little people, my daughter Tasha and my son Nathan, who are 10 and 8 respectively, waiting for Daddy to return home. Years ago, I started my company, Self-Leadership International. When I was in Australia, I now travel the world influencing people to influence themselves. And I love travel, but of course I love coming home, and these are one of my reasons. I've just been away in Brazil, and I had a wonderful reunion with my children just today. It's important that we influence ourselves. It's important that we influence others, because the status quo, the entropy that will occur if we do not. What if your good idea is not heard? Right? What if it's passed over because you didn't have the confidence to speak up? The world would be at a loss. Right? Your self-leadership is not selfish. Self-leadership is you being the best that you can be, makes you a better team member. Right? A team of self-leaders is much more powerful than a team with just a leader and the followers. When people are empowered and engaged. So it's your responsibility to take responsibility for yourself and be accountable to your goals. And I want to make that clarification, responsibility for and to. Now, I'm responsible for myself, right? But I'm not responsible for the people that report to me. I'm not responsible for my employees because I want them to be self-leaders and to be responsible for themselves. I am responsible for my children because they're not yet old enough to be responsible for themselves. If I don't oversee their homework, they won't do it. But as they hit teenage years, I'm going to increase the responsibility they take for themselves and then set them accountable to their own objectives. So we cannot be responsible for others, but we can, in relationship, be accountable to each other. If we're in a marriage, we're not responsible for our partner. We're accountable to them because we've agreed in that marriage. If we're in a business partnership, we're not responsible for our partner's actions. They're an adult. We need to have clear accountabilities and expectations about what each of us should do. So bearing in mind that I started a few minutes behind schedule, I wanted to get to this point where we could answer some questions based on a lot of information that I've shared with you in a very short period of time. So let me hand over to the moderator and see if we have any questions from this presentation.
Well, thank you very much, Andrew, for a very interesting presentation. Folks, we are now open for question and answer. So if you have any questions, you could either put it in the question box or you could raise your hand. There is a hand icon available on the console. So let me go. There are a few callers who have already raised a hand. Let me go straight to first. Brother Ahmad Al-Sayed. Brother Ahmad Al-Sayed, could you please unmute yourself and ask the question as you have raised your hand?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I'm just asking, what about the influence? Do you think that influence should be taken by not by force, but I mean you have to work hardly to be an influencing person, because most probably the position that you have when you are still in the middle management or even below this, you don't have the influence which came from the power of your position. Do you think that I should fight influence, or this should come by position and by growth in the organization?
Okay, fantastic question. Thank you for answering that. So I answer this usually if I'm in front of a class with drawing a line from left to right, and then I take somebody from the audience and I physically pull them out of the audience and put them in a chair. And I ask, if I pulled you out of your chair and moved you to another chair, have I influenced you? And the audience usually, unanimously agrees that is not influence. That's some kind of force or manipulation, right? And so there's clearly a difference between force, manipulation, even persuasion and influence. And even though if you look at in the dictionary, you don't get such a clear definition, I like to see that influence is when the person influenced feels under control. They feel that they have control. So in middle management, it is your responsibility to influence your boss. You don't, let me put it another way. If you're a passenger in a car and the driver of the car starts to, look like they're closing their eyes and falling asleep and drifting across to the wrong side of the road, would you speak up, yes or no? Well, of course you would speak up because you have skin in the game. Right? We have companies where middle managers are not speaking up, influencing their bosses, and the car goes off the road. They're being passive or even passive aggressive. We can influence without force by raising issues, by asking questions, by highlighting. And when I have a team, if I'm leading that team and people are coming up with ideas, I don't say, oh no, shut up, I come up with all the ideas. That would be crazy. I want people to influence me with input. Now, in reality, as you know, in a middle manager, that whoever has the authority to make the decision, can make that decision. It may not be what you wanted, but you have a responsibility to influence what you thought was was a better outcome. And the more you come up with ideas or ask questions, is there a better way to do this? Would this help? Can I do this? The more useful you become to your boss, and therefore very quickly you will become the boss yourself. You will become promoted. So my answer is, you have responsibility to influence, but if you try and manipulate and force, if you confuse those two, then you'll have a problem. Does that answer your question?
Thank you very much, Brother Ahmed Al Sayed. Let me unmute you if you have any supplementary. Yes, Brother Ahmed Al Sayed, you're satisfied with the answer, or any supplementary questions?
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you very much for the question. Now let me go. We have another caller who has raised a hand. We have let me see. We have Brother Jamil Luziest. Brother Jamil.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, could you please introduce yourself and ask the question?
Yes, I would like to have the speaker comment on, taking responsibility in organizations, which are characterized mainly by organizational silence.
Okay. You're going to have to expand on that question, right? So, if that individual has joined an organization with this were they forced to join this organization? What are you trying to achieve?
Yes, not forced, but most of the organizations that are around the region are most of the time characterized by organizational silence. How do you overcome that?
Well, you'd have to give me some specifics on that. When you say most organizations have organizational silence, we're seeing
most public and private organizations in the region are characterized by leadership that come through as we call it in Arabic, wasta. Okay, it's mostly spoil system, not merit system. And they have competencies, and these competencies are not activated. And what do you see around you is organizational silence. So if you try to break this organizational silence, you're out of the game.
Sure. Well, you're out of that game. The question is that the game to be in, right? I mean, I think if you're going to live your life and prepare to mute your voice, then we have a challenge. I'm English by birth. I spent 18 years in Australia, which is a meritocracy. I came to Asia officially, I started coming in 2002. And I was working with Singapore Airlines. I was working across the region. And so my experience is not in the Middle East, it's here in Asia, where, again, we had hierarchical organizations with perhaps what you're calling organizational silence. But in the last 10, 12 years, I've seen a massive shift that even in China, which is in a communist country, where you have companies led by Jack Ma from Alibaba who are empowering their employees, that there is a clear wind of change, that organizations that are agile, that listen to their employees, that empower their employees, whether your employees take self-leadership, are much more effective and efficient and growing much faster than those silent organizations. So, I mean, one of the things I can say is, wait around long enough and the change will happen, or be part of the change you want to see in the world. If you have control over a small area, empower your people. Just because you are not empowered doesn't mean you need to pass that down to your team. Start listening to your team. Start being more effective. Let your results and your impact speak for itself. I can only encourage that. To spend a life of passivity, to accept a status quo that you don't believe in, is soul destroying. Right? Better to leave the organization and become an entrepreneur than to suffer that. But don't discount the influence you already have. I would check that first. Sometimes we think we don't have influence when we do. So, tough question. Hopefully I've given you a perspective.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Brother Jamil, for an interesting question. Now let me move to another caller who's raised a hand. We have Stop, Hashim. Raise your hands. I believe. Let me move to the question box now. Then we have from Brother Kareem Khattab. The question is: sometimes this contradicts with the benefit for some ordinates in some cases. I don't know. That seems like not a full question.
Sounds like a statement to me, not a question.
Yeah. Would you like to take it or share any comments or?
Again, it's and this is what my workshop here today is about. Really, is start with your own locus of control. Yes, life is not fair. Some people are born in positions of wealth and power, and others are not. I just got back from Brazil, where I met a 13-year-old boy whose family are not wealthy. In fact, he has at 13 set up his own business in baking and decorating cakes. He's funding his own education through baking and decorating his own cakes. And this young man has such a positive attitude. Now, in Brazil, there was a lot of I saw a lot of poverty, but misery was scarce. People were enthusiastic about doing what they could do. Whether it was selling water, to drivers who were stuck in traffic jams on the expressways. People, by circumstance, were forced to do very menial tasks, but they did it with a positive attitude. And we should be grateful for what we have. I mean, sometimes we're complaining, my boss doesn't listen to me, but start taking some action. Start with yourself. What can you influence? Have you influenced your attitude? Are you asking the right questions? Are you taking the action, or are you waiting for somebody else to do it for you? In which case, I'm sorry, but you're being the passenger, not the driver. So that's my response to that.
Okay, I think you let me move to another one from Danny Christ. The question is, thanks for this, Andrew. We regulate stress by amount of control. If we can't increase control, we could just assume to have control, lying to ourselves for good cause. Any comments?
Yes, lying to ourselves for good control. So remember, the word is perceived control, right? So some of these questions, I'm getting a theme of a perceived lack of control because the organization is silent or is not empowering or engaging. And this is a perceived lack of control. In positive psychology, Dr. Martin Seligman talked about 3 Ps that lead to helplessness: taking it personally, making it pervasive, and making it permanent, right? It's about me, it's about everything, it's never going to change. The perceived level of control is, well, if it is about me, what can I do about it? It's not directed at me, it's just the way it is. What can I do? Certain things I can't change, but what can I change? And it's not always going to be this way. Things do change. There's a constant evolution of things. Markets go through cycles. So it's choosing, what do I want to control? I can control my attitude. The ultimate with this goes back to a gentleman by the name of Dr. Viktor Frankl, who was a Jewish prisoner of war under the Nazis, who was facing death through the gas chambers. He survived by having an attitude that the Nazis control everything about his environment except his own attitude. He decided they can hate me, but they can't force me to hate them. And he wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning, which gives us the basis of logotherapy, which underpins self-leadership, is that we can control our own attitude. We control the lens through which we see the situation. And that control increases our influence. And that's where we have to start sometimes. Before we change the whole world, we have to change ourselves.
All right, we have another supplementary from Brother Khattab. The question is, obeying my boss may oppose with my subordinates' benefits. What shall I do?
Hang on, could you repeat the question for me?
Obeying my
could
boss may
boss?
oppose with my subordinates' benefits. What shall I do?
Yeah. Okay. So the gentleman asking the question is experiencing the classic middle management dilemma. Is a top-down directive that has not considered the impact and the importance on people, and being stuck in the middle as a middle manager, your loyalty to the organization is to convey that decision. As I've mentioned, life is not fair, and people with the power to make the decisions will often make those decisions. Remember, you're not powerless. When a decision is coming down, you still have the opportunity to raise issues and say, I understand that there is an intention here. I'm just curious about, has the impact on my people been considered? You have the opportunity to have a voice. Will your voice always be heard? No, of course not. But you need to raise that issue. As a manager, our employees want us to provide air cover for them, using the military term of air superiority. Is if you can moderate that decision to impact and empower your people, then that is part of your accountability as a good manager. But the reality is that the best organizations are when the intentions of the people and the intentions of the organization are aligned. Then you're going to have a fast-moving, very effective organization. If the intentions of the organizations do not include the intentions of the people, then that organization is command control and is not going to be as effective. So again, tough question. Being in the middle is always the meat in the sandwich, but never discount your ability to influence up, laterally, and down. Thank you for the question.
Thank you. Another one from Danny. Self-awareness and leadership makes us aware of our feeling and how we possibly behave. Therefore, it gives us the opportunity to change our behavior. Isn't it suggested to be ourselves as a mask change of behavior, which is not currently our natural state of mind, will not hold up?
Okay, so this is a good question. It speaks to authenticity, right? If we're changing ourselves, is that not our natural state, right? The problem here is that we use the word self in English and in most languages as if it's a noun, as if it's a fixed thing, like a table or a chair. I don't know about the question, but I know I am not the same person today as I was a year ago. I'm not the same person as I was 15 years ago. I as a human being, am constantly evolving with experience and with an intentionality. I'm wanting to constantly grow. Now, am I less authentic because I've taken feedback and made adjustment? I don't think so. I think my authenticity is because authenticity can lead us to the word author. I get to write my own script to a large extent. And the previous chapters are finished. I'm not going to keep reading that chapter over and over again. This year, 2016, I want to write a new chapter. Now, obviously, the plot and the narrative from the previous chapters exist, but I get to write a new chapter. Does that make me non-authentic? No, it makes me more authentic. So with self-awareness, I can see, there's some things that I don't like, that I'm working on and I'm developing, and I want to be better at those for me because they're going to make me a better person. I'm not going to change for somebody else. And when we're in a relationship, obviously, if I'm in a relationship with somebody and I want that relationship to be well, and I notice there's aspects of my personality that is conflicting with that, I have the choice. Do I say, well, you know what, this is me, suck it up and take it? Or the relationship's important to me, there's an area I could grow and develop with to make the relationship better. Well, that's my choice and my intentionality. If we just go, hey, this is the way we are, we're fixed, everybody else needs to adjust to us, it's going to lead to a very unhappy life. Now, having said that, I don't live my life by popularity poll, and neither should you, right? There are certain things you say, no, this is authentically me, and this is what I'm going to be. Love you to accept that. If you don't, that's okay. That's your choice. Because if we have self-leadership, we have to expect others to be able to have that as well. So this is a real change in mindset for many people. Working on yourself is the most authentic thing you can do, in my opinion.
Perfect.
Thank you for the question.
Thank you. We have two more questions. Can you give us or equip us with some magic tools required to make ourselves visible in the eyes of our executives?
Yeah, magic tools. What a great question. Okay, well, I've alluded to those, and obviously this was a webinar. Being proactive, as Stephen Covey would say, and I've said it in a slightly different way in my book, is that being intentional, asking questions, making the success of the organization your intention, makes you valuable to your boss. Right? You are being, you're making their job easier. I mean, the simplest magic tool to get promoted is to at least operate at one level above your current pay grade. If you're operating at 2 levels above your pay grade, you will be very shortly promoted. The magic tool is to take that responsibility and take it forward. The 26% of what it takes to get promoted are those people that take action and speak up. Working with global organizations, working with an Indian company who has although it was started actually in Sri Lanka, but has head offices in the US, that the native Indians, I have to encourage them to speak up on conference calls. Their typical culture was to wait until they were asked a question. They were not contributing on calls. They were not adding perspective. So visibility is about asking a question. Is there a better way to do this? What if we did this? Why don't we do this? Why are we doing this? What can I do to help? Asking these questions, these are the magic ways to be visible, in my opinion.
Thank you very much. And we have one last question. Delegating the tasks with enthusiasm and expressing with confidence is very critical to influence others. But how can one maintain this level of calm to express enthusiasm all the time, considering we are ourselves being influenced all the time by negative vibes around us?
Okay, well, in fact, if the asker of that question actually read the question back to themselves, they've answered it for themselves. Is enthusiasm, comes from the Latin entheo, all right, in spirit, which means, and in spirit is, it means to take a breath. All right? We're filled with breath. With enthusiasm, we're filled with spirit, we're filled with a breath. We have a strong why to do something. And what's interesting is that influences those around us. One of the self-leadership stories I tell is once I was in a terrible position in my business. I'd lost a huge amount of money. I'd lost all my wealth. I was traveling by bus instead of the cars that I previously had. And I stepped on a bus, and the bus driver said to me, "Isn't it a great day?" And I had to admit that I was feeling negative, and I wanted to correct him of his viewpoint. But his enthusiasm was contagious. And I smiled back at him and said, "Yes, it is." And as I sat on that bus going into the city, and I watched everybody get on that bus that was greeted by this bus driver that said, "Isn't it a great day?" And seeing how their faces lit up, and then watching them get off the bus and go into offices, to real estate agents and to banks and insurance companies with smiles on their face, that this bus driver, who nobody in those companies knew existed, was being a great motivator for those companies. And if a bus driver could influence people's attitude first thing in the morning, what's your excuse?
Perfect. Well, thank you very much. That really brings us toward the end of the webinar. Andrew, any concluding remarks that you would like to give before we dismiss that?
Yeah, well, thank you. I'd like to make an offer. There's my website there, selfleadership.com. If you go /free, you can get a free chapter of the book Self-Leadership, which gives you a taste of much of what we've said. Obviously, if you want to go ahead and get it, that would be great. And feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I constantly write articles on the LinkedIn blog on leadership, management, self-leadership, influence. All of those are free resources to you. Obviously, if you have an organization that would like to stop being silent and start engaging and empowering its people, I've just come through to Dubai Airport. I would have loved to have stopped and stayed a bit longer. Each time I come to Dubai and the Middle East, I love it. So feel free to send me an email, and I'd happily come and do this live. What I would leave you with this is, the great poem Invictus, which was supposedly a poem that influenced Nelson Mandela in his period of captivity on Robben Island. And this poem, a British poem, says, it matters not how straight the gate, how charged with punishment the scroll. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul. So for the listeners here, please go forth and be the captains of your soul. Stop being a pawn on the chessboard and live lives of meaning and purpose. Thank you.
Thank you indeed, and indeed we are in charge of our own attitude. So with that note, thank you very much, Mr. Andrew Bryant, for a very interesting presentations. We struggled in the beginning to have you on board, and I'm glad that it was resolved. So thank you very much once again, and thank you all of those who participated in this webinar. We are recording this webinar, which will be uploaded on MILE community. So please stay tuned to webinar.mile.org to access the archives and equally sign up for the upcoming webinars. With that note, we'd like to end this